Hi, my name is Janelle Zimmerman, and I am the president of the Model United Nations Club at the University of Utah. And I am here to give a hopefully quick how-to on crisis committees, right? As we approach our upcoming conference in a couple of weeks, we want to help prepare everyone so that they can be ready and know what they're doing headed into the conference. So here we go. Here's a little PowerPoint, and this will be sent out, obviously, so you can get this from your advisor, but I also want to provide a video format where I talk over everything in a little bit more detail if you want to watch it. So, without further ado, I'm going to start by explaining the structure of a crisis committee. All of this guide is given with the understanding that you already kind of understand how MUN works. If you don't, I recommend learning that first. There's lots of guides on YouTube, so we will be talking about this with the assumption that you already know how a traditional MUN committee works. If you've competed in BYU MUN or state MUN that's hosted at our university but it's not by us, then you probably are familiar with or then you know what a traditional committee is. Okay, so this is a crisis committee. It's a little bit different. They are much faster paced than a traditional committee, so things are going to be happening really fast. That means everything you write is going to be a little bit shorter. You're going to get through a lot of different topics. You're going to go in and out of voting procedure a lot. Things will move fast. It includes a lot more role playing. Typically, you represent an individual character, not an entire country. That does happen sometimes where you do represent an entire country as well, and it's a little bit closer to like an actual UN committee, but the MUN part of a crisis committee is used in some loose quotations here. Typically, you're an actual individual and you're playing that character. Get into character both in your committee and outside it. You can have a lot of fun with that, and that is considered like a good element. Crisis committees have what is called a front room, and this is exactly like what you're used to, where you're doing the debate, the speaking, the voting, the writing resolutions or directives as they're called in crisis. This is where you're, the exact stuff that you're used to, right? That's your front room. It's faster paced, right? But it's the same exact stuff, and that's the front room. The back room is basically where you're going to be writing notes. And you don't go to a different room. It's just what it's called. You're sitting in the front room, writing notes to the back room, right? But the back room is where you're writing these secret notes as your character to influence the committee and accomplish your own goals. This means you can do a lot of crazy stuff. And what happens in the back room will affect the front room. The back room will come in and give what's called a crisis update, where they usually make it pretty fun, and they'll like act out stuff and things like that, give updates on what's happening that will change the course of the committee. But that's your back room, right? And it's affecting the front room. It's giving you new issues that you have to deal with and resolve. Crisis uses the same parliamentary procedure as a traditional committee that you're used to, speakers list, moderated caucuses, round robins, all that stuff. The big thing to note here, though, is that moderated caucuses are used much, much more in a crisis committee. So if you're brushing up on your parliamentary procedure, get really comfortable with making a motion for a moderated caucus, because that is a good thing. Chairs, and we want you to be using moderated caucuses as the primary form of debate outside of, like on mods where you're writing your resolutions or whatever. This is important because in a crisis, there's so many different topics going on. So moderated caucuses help set a specific focus, right? Because you're motioning for a speaker's time, set number of speakers, and you have to give your moderated caucus a specific topic that you're supposed to be discussing. So we strongly encourage moderated caucuses whenever you're in formal debate. So get really comfortable with those and you will be well off. The next thing to know is that if you're competitive, you're really wanting an award, you're judged based off your front room participation just like you are in a traditional committee, but you're also judged based off your backroom ideas, basically like how creative they are and how successfully you were able to accomplish them. Or sometimes, other people will mess up what you're trying to accomplish, but how well did you try to accomplish those things and justify them, right? You are rewarded for creativity. You're allowed to be chaotic and silly. There's often assassinations and silly things that happen, or kind of fun things happen. Just remember, as always, to be historically sensitive, and we'll talk about that a little bit more as we go on. Crisis committees are the most common form of committee in Collegiate MUN. This means if you're thinking of competing in Collegiate MUN once you graduate high school, then this is a really good way to start to learn how to do this and get a head start. For whatever reason, crisis committees are not commonly offered at the high school level in Utah. I think some other states have them more often, but for whatever reason, we don't. So this is a great opportunity to learn, and will set you up if you really, really like this for college. And it's a lot of fun. I personally prefer crisis committees to traditional committees, right? They're kind of, I like the more creative elements to them, right? Now let's talk about crisis arcs. They're a major component of what you need to do to prepare for a crisis committee. Crisis arcs are essentially what your goals are as your character to accomplish in the back room of a committee. So your arc is the driving force for why you're voting for things, or you choose to write certain resolutions. And also guides what you choose to do for your crisis notes and how you respond to like what's happening in the committee. These arcs should be based on the historical context of your committee, and they should make sense based on who you are, but they don't need to be historically accurate in the sense that like if your person's a real person and they didn't do that historically, that doesn't mean you can't do it, right? You have creative liberty to kind of retcon history to what you want, but they should fit with like something maybe your character would have done or would make sense for like maybe the position or power that they have, right? So do research about whatever character you get, or, if it's a country, do research about their positions as they relate to the topic, but you do have creative liberty there, right? And you can kind of do whatever. So here's some examples. These are from real conferences. If you are, for example, the Minister of Cultural Affairs in a committee about the USSR, maybe your crisis arc can be to spread USSR culture and music as far as you can to like bolster the economy, right? Or maybe you're a clergyman in a committee about the Holy Roman Empire, and so your crisis arc might be to become the Pope, right? This is a real one, and the guy who did this in our club actually won an award with this crisis arc, right? So he was, I don't actually think it was the Holy Roman Empire, I think it was the Henry II committee, but he was some, clergyman, like kind of lower, or bishop of something, and he basically was like, I'm going to become the Pope, right? And so everything he did was to try to become the Pope. There's lots of different options, basically endless. Be creative, come prepared with an idea and some ways you're going to accomplish that goal. That's one of the best ways you can prepare. There's no position paper, whatever. This is kind of the same concept, though, where you should just come up with like a story that you want for your character. It's common in crisis arcs to use things like assassinations or wars or other chaotic means to achieve your goals. I think in the Holy Roman Empire one that we used as an example, the Pope one, he did assassinate someone to try to become the Pope. These are totally allowed. People do them all the time. That's fine. Use them within reason and don't do them for like bad reasons, whether those are like racist or bigoted, even if it's just your character, like that's a big no-no. Don't like advocate for genocide, for example. I know that should be obvious, but just to clarify. And also another thing is like, let's say you want to do an assassination. Don't target someone just because you don't like them. Like make it for in-character reasons. It's kind of lame, stay in character, no metagaming the conference, right? Also, because these are very common tactics, like use them thoughtfully if you decide to use them. Remember that you don't have to work against the committee, right? You don't have to just be like someone who's trying to like sabotage everything and whatever. You can choose to have an arc that's helping the committee, right? You can choose to do things you can choose to have an arc that is completely selfless, right? You can do a mix of things. the depth and uniqueness to that is always like really good, but it should also be consistent. Well, crisis arcs are often morally gray. You will probably end up doing things that obviously would not be okay in real life. Do remember to be historically and culturally sensitive in whatever you choose to do. Like, you may choose to start a war or a revolution. Those things happen. Those things are fine in the context of a committee, obviously, right? Don't try to just like go for crazy war crimes. Like, if you're going to use those elements, try to keep them like not targeted, keep them, vague. You don't need to just be sensitive, right? Of the historical and cultural implications of your actions, right? Also, if you feel uncomfortable with another person's arc or things that are happening, don't be afraid to talk to your chair or backroom. That is our job, to step in. Another thing I should add here too is if you're not sure if something's okay for you to do or not, just ask. Like, it's okay to write to your backroom and be like, at the start of the committee and say, hey, I'm thinking of going this direction. Is that okay, right? They'll let you know where to not cross the line, right? Just be smart, be sensitive, have fun is kind of the note there. Speaking of notes, the next part of, or like a big part of establishing your crisis arc is through crisis notes. They are short in-character notes that you write to the backroom. They should be creative and in character, but it should also be obvious to the backroom what the goal of the note is and how it helps you progress your crisis arc, right? And your crisis arc is not like a written down thing, but you will make that clear to your backroom as you go on in the committee, right? So they don't have a specific format. They're not like a resolution or directive where you have like a preambulatory clause and all these like signatories and stuff. It's creative writing. You get to write them in whatever format you want to, and creative tends to be better within reason. Or also just in character creative, good. But any good crisis note should always have a couple of things. It should be clear, either who you're writing to or what you're talking about. Like, make it clear who you're talking to, or what, and like why they matter, or who you are writing about and why they matter. All of that stuff should be clear. You should also have a clear goal, like what are you trying to accomplish in this letter? Don't make your backroom have to try to decipher what the heck you want to do. Make it clear why you want to accomplish this goal. Sometimes this will be more obvious than other times, right? Like, sometimes it's pretty obvious why you want to do something. Sometimes it's a little less clear. Your backroom should not be confused. They're not the ones you're trying to keep secrets from, right? Don't make them be like, I don't know why you're trying to do this. Be clear about what you want to do and why. And also be very clear about how you want to accomplish the goals that you set, right? So if you want to do something, say how you're going to do it, right? Support it with steps or actions that use either the powers you have or the powers of the person you're writing to, right? Also, instead of a crisis note, you can pass what's called a joint directive. These will be talked about in more detail later, but sometimes your backroom might let you know that like you or your character don't have the power to do something, but someone else in the committee might. They're not always like super, super clear about this, but they might just be like, we don't know that this is like within the scope of like your powers as you've framed this right now. So in that case, you might consider combining powers with someone else in the committee to pass a joint directive and helping each other accomplish goals together, right? Sometimes you can also try to work around people so that you don't have to use their powers. But for example, if you're over like culture and the economy and someone else is in charge of the military, you may not have military forces, but you could pass a joint directive where like if I'm over the economy, I might give some extra money to the military and they're going to give me some troops that are loyal to me instead, right? Something like that might be a joint directive that you do where you may not have the powers, but you can work with someone else who does. Doesn't have to be the choice, might be a good option. They're generally considered a cool tactic. Another note here is don't be afraid to test the limits of what you can do. If you're not sure if your backroom is going to let you do something, just try it. You're better off having your backroom tell you that, like, either that you can't do something or that like, hey, here's the steps to accomplish your goal. Like, that sounds cool, but we don't have access to this thing or whatever. So that gives you ideas for what you can do next, than like not trying it at all. I think you'd be surprised by what your back room will let you do. So don't be afraid. Don't feel like you have to break things up into too many steps. That said, do try to pace yourself. You should plan an arc that will allow you to work through your goals throughout the committee. You shouldn't try to do everything all at once. Break things into steps. Think of your notes like a story. You want the action to rise with like your biggest things you're going to do. You know, if we're the Pope and we're going to assassinate the Pope, you don't want to do that at the start. Have those things, you know, kind of toward the end, and then kind of wrap things up nicely, right? Think of it, you know, you all took, you know, junior high English where they talk about like the rising action, you know, whatever the top part is, and then the falling action, right? Think of it in that way, right? You don't try to accomplish all your goals at the beginning. Half the time you won't be able to do them, but set yourself up so that you'll be able to accomplish these big ideas that you want to, and then kind of like close things up in a neat little bow, right? You'll have to do some adapting on the fly. Sometimes things will be way harder than you thought. Most of the time things will be easier than you thought they would be, and you're kind of like, oh, what do I do next? That's fine, think on the fly. But I think a good tactic here is always have a motive for your character, so that way when things you don't know how to respond to off the top of your head come, you have a motive, so you can always come up with like new ideas, right? Also, just a reminder that writing your crisis notes in advance before the committee starts is against the rules. Come prepared with ideas, you know, but do not show up with any pre-written notes. Don't be writing your notes over lunch. They should only happen in committee. It is considered cheating. We're not going to kick you out or anything, right? But you will not get an award. Like don't do that. With that, let's look at some examples of some crisis notes. Here's 3 different ones. These are all from our club. We'll start with this. Let's start with the first one first. This is one that someone in our club submitted as for a practice one. She was Elon Musk, and so she actually got really creative and made a fake tweet, right? And even though it's super, super short in what it's saying, and she did go in and, you know, get on the computer and make a fake tweet, right? But it's very clear, like, who she's talking to, right? To the followers, right? Elon Musk's followers. The goal is that, like, the U.S. is up to something shady, and some of this has some context from the committee, but the goal is, like, I want to learn about what the U.S. is doing, so how I'm going to do that is I'm going to have my followers tweet, you know, because they're all, you know, Elon Musk, is everyone following him? I'm going to have some follower respond to me and tell me what's up, right? So we as a backroom actually responded and made this fake tweet that was, you know, giving the information that like the CIA was trying to figure out what Elon Musk was up to, right? And this makes sense in the context of the committee, but like, she's worried about people spying on her. This is how she deals with it and learns information, right? Really good note, and very creative. You don't always have to do something like this. Sometimes you won't be able to, but this is a really fun and creative format to throw in sometimes. The next one, this is actually one from my conference that I did a few years back, 2021. I was Lev Zykov. He was with the USSR. This is actually the one I was talking about where you maybe are like trying to spread music, and this was my crisis arc. And so I wrote, and I'm saying like, these are my motives here, right? I'm loyal to the country, and I'm the minister of the defense and the economy, so I'm concerned with improving the USSR's economy, improving its culture. So we need our music, which is greatly superior, to gain widespread appeal, and this will make us a bunch of money, right? Because then everyone wants to come visit here and listen to our music, and we're making a bunch of money that way. So how I'm going to do that, right? How I'm going to do that goal is I plan to put economic incentives in place by the state to sponsor musicians, okay? To do this is my first step. This is my broad goal. This is my first step. So this is explaining like my full crisis arc. Then this is my first step to accomplish that crisis arc. To do this, right, I'm going to create talent searches that have the potential for widespread appeal, offer to fund their music, and this is the name of it. And then once these economic incentives are in place, then I'm going to work with these people, which were real people in our committee, to grow this industry. And then if done properly, this is the why, right? We can create a new economic industry for a country to bring in revenue from citizens and the international stage alike. This will spread the wonders of our country and bolster tourism and cultural appreciation from the USSR that will revitalize our economy and allow us to maintain high levels of military spending. And then, no joke, I said, basically I want to do this meme, but it's still a legitimate economic strategy. And this is a meme I saw on Tumblr. I don't actually use Tumblr, but I saw this meme, and I legitimately sent it to my backroom, and that is a thing you can do. They usually appreciate a little bit of silliness. And then they responded with just like, this message has been approved, da-da-da-da-da. Sometimes they don't always give you a fun reply. Usually they do. We probably will. We try to keep it fun. But right, like you can be a little playful with your chair, right? And you want to write this in character, right? So it's a diary entry here, which is a common tactic. If you don't know who else to write to, they're kind of boring, but writing to as a diary entry is always good. Another good example is this right here. This is from an old club member, and this is this Pope arc where he was going to try to become the Pope. This note's kind of long. Most of the time, they're going to be more the length that I shared. They don't have to be this long, but he's trying to become the Pope. So this note doesn't directly like make me the Pope, but he's explaining his first step in his goals, right? So he says, from this really long name, primate over of all the Scotland and the Isles, this is very, very in character, right? He's writing this really long thing. He's giving his character a persona, and he says, to my servant, this guy, clerk and steward to the Archbishop of York, greetings, right? So he gives this, like, I think this is supposed to say loyal, but, like, he tells us who he's writing to. His servant, fake name, and steward for him, right? So you want to establish who you're writing to, and you can just make up people. They don't have to be real, right? Like, this is just some random servant that he made up a name for, right? And then he says, all correspondence between us must be written in code and cipher, which we previously agreed upon and is only known to us. This is something he also just made up, right? And, this is his first note. There was no previous agreement. But you can make up stuff that's happened in prior with your character, right? Like, it's actually pretty good to establish kind of like the relationship between the characters you're writing to if you're writing a letter, right? And then he says, like, you've been serving me for a long time. I'm indebted to you. You will be rewarded. Give these characters a motive to help you if you're asking for the help of someone else to do something for you, right? Which you often will be. It doesn't always have to be like your friends. It can be because they work for you. It can be blackmail. It can be like, you're my ex-wife and we have a complicated history. Get in character, get fun with it, You can make up whoever you need to. You can write to some revolutionary. You can write to a made-up government official, right? Go for it, right? Then he gives the steps, right? So first he's going to protect himself by having bodyguards. Make sure they are going to be loyal. This is how he's going to keep them loyal, right? And then this one's going to taste test, provide maps of the castles and cities which the court will visit so he knows where to hide, make sure that they watch for spies, make sure that anyone attempted spying against me, that they report to me, let me know any of these holy sanctums if my life is threatened. And he's doing this because he's trying to make sure that he's protected in case someone tries to assassinate him, which could really happen in this committee, right? So he's actually already establishing protection for himself. And this is a common goal that people will go with. And then he's going to say, make sure to use, and also a quick note here is he says, like, use a portion of my revenues from New York, right? He's saying where he's getting this money from. You don't always have to justify it. That obviously, we're just going to pretend that he has money here, right? The backroom is going to accept that. Just justify it, however, right? Make use of the taxation rights and economic resources of the diocese to grow our financial base, right? Invest church resources into trade in the ports of York and Lincoln that are in my jurisdiction, right? So he's trying to get power for himself through the export in silver and textiles, and like saying these are abundant here. So he's kind of justifying that, like, this is historically accurate. These are abundant here. We will bring economic prosperity to the land and the church, and then these resources will encourage the trade through these areas, and these can turn a profit by taxing them to foreign lands in need of such raw materials, right? Let it be known that any further raids against the Archdiocese of York will be met with an immediate excommunication. Please entreat the Pope to intercede with the King of Denmark to stop these illegal attacks against us good Christians, right? So he's just explaining, like, he's going to try to get all this economic power, right? Which this isn't as explicit for his bigger goal, but it is clear he wants economic power, right? And here's how he's going to do it. And then he's going to, sign this out, and he makes a really funny long ending because it's funny and it's in character. You don't have to do this, but you can make it fun and entertaining however you want and however feels in character. And so then they get a response, and he says, "To my Lord Jeffrey, I'm greatly honored to be named your successor. I find these bodyguards," and then they're going to tell you, like, what they're going to do, and then he kind of warns it, like, the time for a trip would be useless, and then they're going to give an encouragement, like, to do this instead, right? So your backroom is going to kind of nudge you in a direction they want you to go to kind of accomplish the goals that you want to. But they're usually pretty helpful with what you want to do. They'll just kind of try to, like, nudge you and, like, see here, he's like, he says that he wants all this money, but they're like, is there any specific way you plan to use your resources, right? Like, they're trying to get an idea of, like, what his deeper goals are. This is all part of, like, this bigger thing, but your backroom will kind of try to prod you for more information. So that's an example of a good note. Okay. That's that. Next is directives, Directives are exactly like resolutions for the most part. They're what we call resolutions in a crisis committee, so get used to calling resolutions directives, okay? They're the same thing with a couple minor differences. The biggest one is that they're shorter and less detailed than the resolution, but they follow the same principles in formatting. You will need sponsors, you will need signatories. Technically, you need preambulatory and operative clauses. The front room is usually not super strict on this, and they're not going to send it back for, like, revisions like they do in standard conference. Like, you can be a lot more informal in these, but they do need to follow the basic formatting still. You will be writing a lot of directives, and you will be writing them fast, so do not expect them to have the same level of detail. Speed is key in a crisis committee, and sometimes they will even be timed. If there's a timed crisis, you literally will only have, like, a certain amount of time to crank out an idea, right? Because it's like, someone's been kidnapped, and if you don't respond by this time, right, it'll always be in character or in story, but you'll have, like, a timed crisis, right? Expect to work with a lot of different blocks throughout the committee. You pass so many directives, so the people you're working with is shifting constantly. That's okay. It's not where you're going to be working with the same set group of people the whole time. You will be for, like, a certain section, and there's probably certain people you will work with a lot more than others, but the dynamics are going to shift throughout the conference. That's okay. And people are going to have, like, allies that betray them, and, all this crazy stuff is going to happen. So, like, that's going to change around a lot. This isn't a requirement, but a common practice in crisis committees is to come up with funny names for your directives. Don't be afraid to do this if you want. I'm just including this because we love it. This is a very common cultural thing in Crisis MUN. All the examples I'm going to show are going to have really funny names. You don't have to do this. It's fun. And you will not get in trouble for having silly names. Not unlike, but along with the front room directives that are just like resolutions, you can also write joint directives. These do not need to be voted on. The normal directives will be voted on, and, you'll go into voting procedure and whatever else, but these get passed to the back room like they are a crisis note, and they're formatted the same way as a normal directive, but they are a private directive between two or more committee members to accomplish a secret goal together. So you're going to do something together, combine your resources, and usually it's kind of like I'll do something, quid pro quo, I'm going to do something for you and you're going to do something for me type of directive. And that is a thing where you can work with other people secretly to accomplish your crisis arcs, right? And these directives should be trying to resolve not the joint directives, but the directives as a whole should be trying to resolve the crises that your committee is facing, but you can also sneak in things into the resolutions that kind of, give you power or benefit what you're trying to do for the backroom. I think in one I put we're going to provide funding for my thing, and then I wrote a backroom note that's like, because we're the ones funding this, put a secret room for my secret base in this building, right? That's just an example because we were trying to build some building. You can use things that happen in your resolutions or your directives that get passed to do things in the back room, right? And they should, you can have a different presence in the front room than the back room, but they should ultimately be like accomplishing your goal. So here's some examples of directives. We're going to look at them. This is the Ice Baby, Burn Baby. Both of these ones we're going to look at are from my USSR committee, where these are both from when the Winter Palace burned. And so you can see these are super short. They forgot to even put signatories on here, and I don't think the chair cared, but they put who the sponsors are, they say what they're going to do, and it's usually just the operative clauses. Sometimes they include some preambulatory stuff, but most of the time it's just like, this is what we're going to do. And you're still using the preambulatory, or not preambulatory, but the operative clauses here. And you're giving details. But I mean, this thing is so short, right? They maybe spent like 10, 20 minutes, probably more like 10 minutes writing this thing. This one's a little bit longer, but they're saying, again, it's mostly operative clauses. Here they actually had their signatories. They actually putting on these details, and they put some inspiration. This is kind of funny for what they wanted the new Winter Palace to look like, right? Because remember, this is in response to it burning down. And then they're like, we're going to develop these materials. Here's all these details. They maybe address some other, they're going to investigate the crime as well as propose some ideas, like send emergency fire response. This is it, right? These are very simple. A good tactic is to try to focus on one section of a directive in every one that gets passed. So that way you're contributing, but you're not trying to write the whole thing. They're like easy resolutions, and they're just meant to respond to the crises that are happening in the committee. Here's an example of a joint directive. They are pretty similar. You can see here, though, we just state the sponsors, and these are all the people who are kind of sending these as backroom notes. And then these use a little bit more preambulatory, and then we kind of say, here's what we're worried about, and we need to bolster the economy. So this character is going to do this thing, this character is going to do this thing, and this character is doing this, right? And so we're all working together to accomplish this goal, right? And so I'm providing funding for advertising and music, and it's being carried out by these people. So we're all giving kind of each other some benefits, or just doing something together that we're not having being a voted on thing. We are just using our powers together to do this thing. So that's how you can use a joint directive. There's lots of creative ways you can do joint directives, so have fun. You could write a joint directive to assassinate someone. I use that as an example a lot because it's a dramatic thing to do. But there's work with other people, right? You can make secret plans together, right? And they might backstab you, and you don't know who you can trust, right? That's kind of the fun of a crisis committee. So that's pretty much everything. The last couple of tips and resources are the best way you're going to learn is just by doing it. Come prepared with your crisis arc, but don't stress. Crisis committees are going to put to test your ability to come up with ideas and solutions on the fly. There are a lot of things for you to manage all at once. You are writing your crisis notes while you're trying to pay attention and prepare to speak, and you're also having to write resolutions, directives, all at the same time. Try to balance what you can and do your best to contribute to both the front and the back room, but it's also okay to kind of prioritize one over the other for a little bit, right? Don't try to literally be doing everything at once. Some of this does come with practice, but it's, again, a good tactic is maybe focus on one section of a resolution and then work on your note. And then while someone's speaking, maybe you take some time to write, and then you're listening enough that you can respond. And then maybe you stop your note to listen and then you speak, right? Just kind of try to balance that time. It takes practice. It's okay. You might be overwhelmed. Everyone's learning. If this is your first time MUN, make sure you are familiar with not just how MUN works as a whole, but especially Parley Pro. There's in this PowerPoint, there is a cheat sheet for you to use for parliamentary procedure. Don't be afraid to print it out and bring it with you if you need it. I still sometimes bring a cheat sheet of Parley Pro when I go to conferences. There's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't mean you don't know what you're doing. I would rather people make motions and be using Parley Pro if it means having a little guide than not have it and the committee's just quiet or no one's doing anything, right? Just even if you do it wrong, your chair is going to correct you a little bit, but just go for it. Don't be shy. Just do it. You know, don't be afraid to ask your chair or back room for help. Like, the goal of this committee is to introduce people to crisis, especially if you plan on doing it in college. We understand that like most of the people competing are going to be new to how this works. And so we're always happy to clarify things and help you out. Don't stress. It'll be okay. And then the next and most important thing is to have fun. Like, especially in crisis committees, there's a lot of opportunities for silliness and chaos. We're going to embrace some of the fun elements of, you know, a crisis committee. It's going to be silly. It's going to be chaotic. There's going to be lots of funny stuff that you'll get to recount to your friends, you know, when you're telling them about that. I like to describe crisis committees as academic Dungeons and Dragons, right? You're doing a lot of role playing and deciding random things, right? Like, MUN is academic, but it is also fun, you know? Like, this is one, forgive the fact that this is from an inappropriate song, sorry, teachers, but like, for this USSR committee, you know, I'm dealing with music. We literally wrote a parody to WAP called Workers in Production, and we made Kanye Screw the West and Megan the Stalin, right? Like, we wrote a whole parody and performed this in our committee. Like, this is in a legitimate competition that I competed in with University of Chicago. Like, and theirs is a pretty highly like revered like MUN conference. Like, silly stuff is gonna happen. Embrace that, you know, don't go off the rails, like, just chaos, no historical accuracy, no relevance to anything going on, but also have fun, be creative. It's gonna be a good time, you know. And that's all. We're super excited to have you. We can't wait for a couple weeks. Hopefully this guide was helpful and you were able to watch it all and learn a lot. Have a good one. Bye.